A lot of times anytime
Stormy, thanks for taking the time talk to us about your show.
Thank you for
Uh,
having me.
so reading about you that you've had a lifetime of weird paranormal experiences. Do you remember the earliest when that started, and can you describe some of them?
Okay, so the first thing that I remember that maybe could be attributed to paranormal, and it didn't actually click until I was much older that it was strange, is I remember being 3 years old and I was with my mother, and we lived in Idaho Falls, Idaho at the time. And we went to this big gymnasium. And now that I'm a mother and I've gone through the same thing with my child at that age, I understand now that it was like a placement thing to see what grades or where to put kids. You know what I mean? Because I remember being 3 and they had like an obstacle course, and told you to pick the colors and you put the shapes and the things for motor skills. It was definitely like a placement, or they're gonna put you in preschool or hold you for a year. And I've gone through that as a parent now. So now looking back, I'm like, oh, that's what that was, you know? And I don't remember really a lot of the rest of it, but I remember at the very end, we were sitting in this office that was inside, and it was just this metal desk, and my mother's sitting next to me. And to tell you how long ago it was, she was smoking a cigarette. And I just aged myself, didn't I? And the lady is sitting across from me. I must have done something strange before that my mother had me come in. And she's holding this pencil on the table, like, you know, like this, and it's on the table. And she's like, I'm gonna move my hand and I want you to keep it there. And so it's almost like the scene that came out years later in The Craft, but all I did was make it stay and do this by looking at it. And my mom screamed and dropped the cigarette in her purse. And it was this big thing. And it scared me. Like everybody was so freaked out, it made me cry. And I haven't never done that before that, and never done it since. But that's the first thing that, looking back, I was like, what was that? And then I had a couple of instances, like 1 or 2 big things all the way through the rest of my life. One of the most significant ones was when I was 17, I was out riding my horse and the sun was falling, and one of the horses broke away from the herd and took off across the pasture. And if you know anything about horses and their psychology, that's not something that they do. And I was like, I remember the horse. It wasn't one of mine. It belonged to the riding school that I kept my horse at. And the horse's name was Nine High. And I just remember, I was like, wonder what's wrong with Nine High. So I took off after him on my horse and chased him. And we got some, as I'm chasing him through the pasture, I swear I saw somebody on his back. And I caught up to him at the back end of the pasture, and he was pressed against the fence, sweating and pawing, so far away from the rest of the herd. And horses don't do that. And so I thought that was very strange. So I ended up, like, the next day going out and going on the other side of that fence and walking back there. And I found a burned down plantation home, and I saw the same figure, like, walking up. And I brought people out there, like boyfriends and stuff. I was like, do you want to see a ghost? Like, all through the rest of, like, high school and stuff. And I brought one friend out there. His name's Mark Calcaterra, and he got so scared he took off running and forgot the fence was a hot wire. So that's, like, just kind of like these things that have happened. But I didn't know how to interact. I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know there was such a thing as even doing that. There was no ghost hunting television shows on yet. I wasn't interacting with these things. And the next big thing that happened, which kind of made me shut down, was I was 23 years old, and I was married to my then husband, who was an adult film director. His name was Pat Mine. And we were in our house. He's much older than me. Sorry, Pat, because he might be listening. We're still very good friends. And this was about 20 years, almost 20 years ago. And I'm standing at the sink and I'm washing dishes. And I had a premonition of someone passing away. And it freaked me out, and I broke the glass, and I ran out into the garage where he was polishing his motorcycle. And I said, we have to go get, I don't want to say her name, it's his daughter. I was like, we have to go get her. We have to go get her. And he accused me of trying to start an argument between him and his ex, which wasn't the case. And he told me I was crazy, so I completely dropped it. And 5 days later, we buried his daughter. She was 13 and completely healthy. And I felt so terrible for so many years that I just shut it off, because I should have been like, screw you, and gotten in my car and gone down there and gotten her. I blamed myself for a very, very long time. And ultimately he and I split up, and we didn't even address this again until about 4 months ago. So almost, all these years went by, and it's pretty intense. And then, I got super busy. For those who followed my career, like, I don't hide it. I was a pretty prolific and famous porn star for a long time, and director. And I loved that. I don't renounce it at all. It gave me all the opportunities that I have. And I loved my time in the adult industry, but I was very busy. I was under contract with the biggest company. And I mean, I probably slept in my own bed 5 nights a month. I was doing appearances and dancing and store signings and filming and photo shoots and, all of the things that come with being under contract with a big company. And I just think I was just moving too fast, and I moved back to New Orleans about 3 years ago. And the house that I moved into was extremely haunted.
So it kind of reawakened your connection to this phenomena.
Yeah. And keep in mind, even though I wasn't paying as much attention for all those years in between, I still had some pretty big instances happen. If you go to the Spooky Babes Instagram and scroll down, you'll see an incident that happened 12 years ago where something comes down through the ceiling, and I got it on my cell phone. Like, it was still like 1 or 2 big things a year that were so dramatic that you're like, what the hell is that? Things that couldn't be ignored. But as far as like everyday interactions and stuff, like, I wasn't open to it. I was busy and caught up in myself, and to be honest, didn't want to. And I moved into that house that was so loud I couldn't ignore it, and kind of slowed down. And that was kind of how Spooky Babes got started, because this house was off the charts. And I sat down finally and made a list of the people who stepped foot in that house, and 23 people entered that home in the 10 months that I lived there, and 21 of them had significant experiences. And a lot of the people don't know each other. And so the guy that moved into that house with me that I was dating at the time, the house was very fixated on him. It altered his personality greatly. He lasted 5 weeks before we broke up. And he accused me of being crazy and making it up. And so I started out on this quest, to prove that the things I was seeing and feeling and all the stuff that was happening was real. And nobody would help me. Like, I emailed all the big ghost hunting shows. I called, I was desperate. I was having physical effects, all these things were happening. I put cameras in the house. I got things on film, but I wanted people to verify this is, real. And no one would help me. So my friend, Justin Loop, we had become friends in that time, and he had an experience in the house too. He was like, why don't we just do it ourselves? I'll go with you. And so Justin's my partner in the show. If you look at any of the Spooky Babe stuff, he's the other person in the logo. And so we just set out. I really thought we would just go to 1 or 2 places and investigate, and I'd get the evidence and the closure I needed. I had no idea that it was just going to pour gasoline on this fire.
I don't know how you fit it in with all the other things you got going on in your life, but you got a bus, and you were on the road basically to haunted places for 1.5 years.
Yes.
Recording things?
Yep. Yeah.
So tell me about some of the places you went, what kind of events that you were able to document, what's the spookiest?
The bus, I already had the bus because I was already on tour before that, making my appearances at clubs, and I was still stripping. I was still a dancer. I'm not gonna turn my back on that kind of money. So I already had the bus. I had already been on the bus for over 1 year doing my Stormy Daniels stuff. My stuff is, for dancing and comedy clubs and other appearances. So I was already had the bus and the access to it. I just switched to what we used it for. And for 1.5 years, I was on the bus going to locations. And for up until March 1st, the last 6 months, Justin and I lived on the bus exclusively. Turns out the bus ended up becoming haunted of its own, like stuff came on. But let's see, we have filmed 13 or 14 total episodes. We stayed the night and investigated places like the Lizzie Borden house, the Villisca Axe Murder house, Malvern Manor, McIntyre Villa, Sally House. I mean, we've been all over to these very big places that people always say, like, what's the most active, or like, what's the most significant? And I guess for me, like, there's three that stands out. Well, they were all, we only went to one place that I was like, this is a waste of everything. We went to a theater in Charlotte there was nothing there. But that's the reality of it. You know, there was nothing, and it's the place I spent the most money on too, of course. Total waste of money and time. But there were a couple, like Malvern Manor is known for being very, very active, and a lot of people get stuff there, and it just didn't do anything for me. So I want to go back with like a couple different people and different instruments. But I will tell you the three places that stand out the most for me is the second place I ever went to, and I can't say the name of it because they don't want me to.
Oh.
They've to me, but it's a house in Mississippi, and it was there where I met the paranormal investigator who then came on to be on my show, and is where I got my haunted doll. And as soon as we got together, that's when I started to be able to actually interact, he made me a medium. Something about us together like just lit something on fire. So that's very significant to me because it was kind of the first place and the first time I was able to do things. It's also where I met my haunted doll, Susan, and she spoke for the first time. The other big place that stands out to me is probably where we got the most undisputable evidence was Vale Mansion in Missouri. I think it's in Independence, Missouri, but we've got like some serious like evidence on film, like undeniable stuff. We caught it on film. We caught the doll moving on film. We caught the doll talking on film. We have these crazy shadow figures that appear. And I mean, it's just, John Bullard got scratched on the shoulder. Like there's so much evidence that we got in that one spot, but everybody says like, what's the craziest? What's the scariest? Hands down, the Conjuring house for me. It scared me so bad I slept in the driveway in like 30-degree weather. Me and my cameraman, because he wouldn't go back in either. We were like, screw this, we're sleeping outside.
What did it do? I mean, I guess the larger question is, are these malevolent, these things that you encounter, that you channel, that you're a medium for?
I would say 95 to 95%. No, absolutely not. They're benevolent or indifferent even, you know what I mean? I've only come across a few things that were really, really negative. And the Conjuring house is the one that like, it affected, it's the only one that physically attacks somebody. If you get touched or even pushed a little bit or even scratched, it doesn't mean there's a demon. It doesn't mean that it's negative. It just might be something trying to get your attention. But the Conjuring house in Rhode Island, my cameraman got punched really hard in the back of the head. It swole up. That's to me aggressive. We had a camera battery burst into flames. We had our whole lighting rig get like smashed to the ground. Like, and it just is the way you can kind of feel. Like I mentioned my partner in the show, Justin, he's my best friend. Like we've never dated. We don't date. There's never been any animosity between us or anything romantic. We've never had any sort of like intense chemistry, good or bad, between us. We're just friends. And I know like I've never been afraid of him in any capacity. We live together. We currently live together. He came into the bathroom while I was getting ready. And he, you know, when you're in a bathroom, there's no way out. And we were in the house and I was putting my makeup on or curling my hair or something. And he came in behind me and I literally wanted to like jump out of a window. I have never been afraid of him. And he just stood behind me and looked at me. And he later confessed that he wanted to hurt everybody. And that's not him. That's not him. And he got a hold of himself and went outside, but like everybody felt like this oppression. I don't know. Like it was a bad vibe all night. Some of the EVPs we got were told me to shut the F up. The craziest thing is my doll was out in the car and the car alarm went off and we ran outside and she was out of the car and on the ground. I mean, it was just not a good place. Like, but I'd say most of the time it's not like that. Like, it's just, you know, you go in and I think the trick is to treat the dead or the spirits of the energy or whatever it is that you want to refer to it as, whatever word you use for that type of phenomenon, is to go in like you would go into someone's home that was living. Like, you don't go into somebody's house and be like, I'm here, dance, light this up, do this, prove that you're real, or I don't believe in this, get the hell out. Like, you go in just like you would, you know, I treat the dead the same as I treat the living. and you make it very clear that you're not there to chase them out, unless, I mean, that's a whole separate thing. That's not what we do, but there's a time and a place for that, obviously. But I'm not here to chase you out. I'm not here to ask anything of you. This is my name. This is his name. We're just curious. Like, welcome to your house. How long have you been here? What a lovely place. Like, you literally just want to keep reminding yourself to talk to them the same as if they were living.
Does any of this attach itself to you and come back with you?
So we work very hard to make sure that doesn't happen. We tell everything you're not to follow us. We wear protection. When we get back on the bus was protected. Here now is protected. And there's been 2 incidences where something got through. Yes. And the first time it was because we were late to the location and it was pouring down rain and I forgot to lock down the bus. And luckily it just was this little, it just caused some mischief. It wasn't anything negative. And something got into where I'm at now a few weeks ago and we had to call in somebody else. But I don't think that followed us home. I think that was, I mean, I live in New Orleans. Everything is haunted here.
So I've been chasing weird stuff for a long time, and you could call it paranormal, but maybe that's because we can't quite understand it. Some of these places, Skinwalker Ranch, for example, has poltergeist type activity, as well as crypto creatures, a lot of weird stuff all at the same time. I wonder if you have places where you've gone where it's a multiple kinds of different phenomena at the same location.
What is your take on that? Like, I'm curious. Like,
I don't know the answer. It's almost like for the ranch, it's almost like it's a portal where different things come in and out of into our reality from somewhere else. And it's almost like a highway. If one thing opens it, like say UFOs are seen there, other things can come in and out. And maybe it's not all planned. That's related to each other. I don't know. I'm not, in our group, I'm not the scientific one so much, because I see things other people can't see, but I have started to really take an interest in that aspect of it. And there are some things that I have found in locations that I'm starting to really document a pattern. There are some things that not all locations, but I have found the most active and varied locations have some of the same things. I actually, one of my people in the shows, John Bullard, makes fun of me because I travel like with an actual fold out map, and I'll mark and I sit there with hours and every place we go, I mark it and I'm just trying to find patterns. And then I got another map of the ley lines, and there's definitely a correlation between like how much quartz or crystal, for instance, is in the ground, the sand, and the lines, the mineral lines seem to be a big corresponding factor that I personally found. And then I found out I wasn't so smart. Other people had figured it out before me. But, I guess the best example is that somebody explained it to me, like, what's your computer screen made out of? Or, it's crystal, it's a conduit. A lot of people have that affiliation with the water too. I have yet to really be able to prove or disprove that, except for the fact that I happen to live in New Orleans, which is below sea level and the most haunted place I know. Like the for sale signs actually have haunted or not haunted, like on the real estate signs in the city. There are a couple of plants that I have found at every haunted location, no matter where. And and I've noticed that the most active places seem to be off the ground. So I don't know if that's because things can go all the way around the building or if it's not grounded. But like a house that's elevated, like the one I'm in right now, because I'm in New Orleans, something that's not flat on the ground, that has, those tend to be the most haunted places that I have found. And then you can talk about like places that were used for any sort of like rituals or places where something traumatic happened, but everybody knows about that. Right.
And then you go into like all the different kinds of energies. There's the stuff that's on a loop or an energy, like, some people call it a stain. It's just, and then you have intelligent spirits, intelligent human spirits, and you have
non-human spirits. And then I just only started kind of opening my mind to what could be an alien. Like if you look at drawings and things of aliens, they look very similar to what other people call a demon. So,
yeah,
you know,
Aleister Crowley conjured up some kind of a demon. He had a name for it, and it looked just like a big-headed alien.
Yeah. So if you're super, super religious, hardcore Christian, and you don't believe in aliens, and you see this thing outside your house looking in, the word that your language and you're gonna use is demon.
Right.
And then you might have another person who's a scientist that doesn't believe in demons, has never read the Bible, doesn't know what a demon looks like, and they see the same thing looking in, and your verbiage is gonna immediately be alien. You know, so who's right, who's wrong? I think we're pretty far off from that part out.
We're on the threshold of science taking this stuff a little more seriously, the science of consciousness, trying to understand what happens to us when we die. And a lot more open-mindedness about that maybe, you know, physical death is not the end, that there is some science behind the idea that we go on and that we go somewhere else. That's encouraging.
I know for a fact that there's something after now. You know, I get asked very often, like, what is the biggest thing about doing the show? Like, what's the biggest change for you? Is it that you communicate with spirits, or that you see dead people now? And I'm like, the biggest change for me, like the biggest change in who I am since I started doing this, is I'm not afraid to die anymore. Like literally, like I'm not afraid of death at all anymore since I started doing this. The second thing is, I've seen so much weird stuff in the last year and a half. I don't question anything. You could literally be like, a unicorn is going to walk through your living room in 5 minutes, and I would be like, a unicorn might walk through my living room in 5 minutes. Like, I'm not saying it is or it isn't, because I have seen some stuff that I can't explain, and it's undeniable.
Tell us about the show. I guess you intend to continue pursuing it. Where do people see it? Is it doing okay? You happy with it so far?
The show is in editing. We have about 13 episodes. It's almost done. We are currently shopping it. I can't say too much, but we are under a development contract with for another paranormal documentary. So it's looking like that show will come out first, because it sort of is the origin of Spooky Babes, and that's kind of the goal. Because there was a lot of gatekeeping, a lot of haters when I started doing this. People in the field did not want me to do it. They told me I was full of crap, like I was fake. They did not, oh, she did porn, why is she doing paranormal? I'm like, what's the difference? You're a plumber and you can do paranormal? Like,
right.
Like, I don't really understand like what the correlation is. And then obviously all the other stuff, the political stuff and whatever, people wanted to hold that against me, but I don't really understand it's just people gatekeeping and thinking I was fake. And I've been very lucky. Like, I've slowly changed people's minds. I've proven myself over and over. I've gone into locations and told people, I've gone into people's houses and found things. And but it's been an uphill battle. Like, I feel like, most people start in paranormal here and have to go here. I started down here. I had to like prove that, that I was doing it for the right reasons and I was legit. So I was so anxious to get Spooky Babes out. I funded it all myself, self-funded. I paid for all of it. Everything about it, I own 100%. And I was so anxious to get it out. First of all, I want my money back. Let's be honest. I want to get my expenses back, but I wanted to prove to everyone that I was telling the truth. And I didn't want anybody else to feel alone. But I realize now that a lot of people are just not even going to look at it. They're going to be like, oh, there's Stormy doing something. Or some people think it's porn. I'm like, it's not porn. But so we're doing like almost a prequel, I guess, like an introductory documentary that goes back into my past, into things that happened. And it kind of explains the origin. And it's not about the locations that we've gone to. It's about me and my experiences. And I think that it's going to be a good way to jumpstart the show. But the show is really great. We've got some incredible stuff. We went to some great places. And in the meantime, we go back out on the road in a couple weeks.
Well, I've seen the trailers. They look great. I mean, it's really well shot and edited and everything. And I was drawn by one thing you said in one of those, is that you really want to help people with this, because a lot of people are confronted with the paranormal, supernatural, and it messes them up.
It really does. And nobody would help me. So I understand what that's like. And I have found, just from being in my time an adult, that I'm more approachable than most people, because what could you possibly say to a porn star that's going to shock them? You know what I mean? So people feel like, well, I've seen her without her clothes on, so she's, like, for some reason, people just feel more comfortable coming up and telling me things. And so I mean, I get emails all day, every day, people asking me for help. And then the other really big important thing for me personally was to be able to incorporate post-care and healing and helping people set about like moving forward. And the most important thing is that when you go into a place and you help people, first thing you want to do is find a logical explanation. I'm like, your house is unhaunted, you have a raccoon in the attic, you know, like we try to debunk everything first, because sometimes there's just some very logical explanations. Sometimes the person legitimately is just nuts and they need to see a doctor. So you want to like rule out all of that normal stuff first. But sometimes you're in a place that's so unhealthy, you know, it's so doesn't gel with the person currently living there, like that they need to get out. And if someone is in a house that's so haunted or active, whatever words you want to use, that they're reaching out to a complete stranger, do you realize how desperate they must be to get to that point? Because I can tell you right now, if I'm living in a house and my kid is being physically attacked, I'm leaving. Like, I'm not waiting for Ghost Adventures to get there. Like, peace, I'm out. You know what I mean? So for somebody to be in that situation where they are reaching out to people like me or the other investigators, that's how desperate they are and how trapped they are. So, you know, I own a charity events company here in New Orleans, and our main goal is just to make sure that people can get out of the situations that they're trapped in.
I appreciate you talking to us.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks.